disbursement of such fund. That is accountability. And the question say rendering of account. What is rendering of account? Differentiate clearly in relation to public accountability between rendering of account and holding to account. What is rendering of account? Rendering of account. Rendering of account is the process of showing how public fund received have been spent why holding to account is the exercise of judgment. And power over public officers, public officers. Let's look at question 2. Question 2 says, what is fiscal transparency? What is fiscal transparency? What is fiscal transparency? Fiscal transparency is the aspect of public accountability which requires government to carry out all aspects of budgeting, budgeting responsibility, with openness, with trust, with basic values, and ethical standards, so that it will have nothing to hide. From the public. And where there is something to hide, and where a government has something to hide, where a government has something to hide, then public reporting is more likely to be infrequent, because there is something to hide. It will not be frequent. It will also be unreliable. It will be unreliable because the information will not be accurate, and less comprehensive, in order to hide material facts from the public. Question B say enumerate 4 IMF code of good practices on fiscal transparency. Enumerate 4 IMF code of good practice on fiscal transparency. So IMF B says, the question B, enumerate 4 IMF code of good practices on fiscal transparency. B. Number 1, IMF code of good practice. And fiscal transparency. Number 1, we have clarity of roles and responsibility. We have open budget process. We have public availability of information. Information must be available to the public. And we have assurances of integrity. Assurance of integrity, and these are the 4 codes of good practices. Let's look at question 3. Question 3 says state 5 conditions that facilitate promotion of public accountability. 5 conditions. State 5 conditions. Say we should state 5 conditions. State 5 conditions that facilitate the promotion of public accountability. Solution: 5 conditions that facilitate promotion of public accountability. Number 1, we have availability of democratic institutions. Democratic institutions that allows for changes in leadership. Changes in leadership through free and fair election. Through free and fair election. Number two, we have public accountability. Public accountability needs the presence. Public accountability needs the presence of active investigative media. Active investigative media that will help to keep the leadership on their toes. Point 3, the existence of leadership that genuinely believes and committed to the notion of public accountability. And such leaders will therefore ensure that the laws to safeguard public funds are enforced. The law to safeguard public funds are enforced irrespective of the might, the position, of the public officer, irrespective of the might, the position of the public officer concerned. And the 4th point is that the public accountability will be enhanced if the generality of populace, of the populace do not believe if they do not believe that embezzlement, if they do not believe that the embezzlement of public fund, is part of the political manifesto, because the moment they believe that it's part of the political manifesto, they see it as normal. They see embezzlement as normal things to be done. They don't see it as part of political manifesto, which the political leaders achieve, achieved while in the office, at the detriment of original manifesto.